from the left to the right on your screen, you see the following experts: Jens Plötz and Gerald Weber, two of our port state experts, followed by Alessandro Cardamone and Aleksandr Jegorov, two of our fire safety experts, and they will be with us all the time today. Then, and before I hand over to the first of my colleagues, a quick recap of the agenda, short and sweet. After a brief introduction, the CIC questions will be reviewed one after another. Then some recommendations on how to better be prepared. And last but not least, the Q&A session where we will take your questions as long as the time permits. Then finally, I'm handing the microphone over to you, Jens Plötz. Welcome, the stage is yours, and please go ahead.
Yes, hello to the audience. Welcome here in the webinar. Just a short snapshot where we are going, what is going on from the two main MOUs, which are the organizers as well of the CIC. We have the data and we see that the trend is going upwards. We have more inspections than before the pandemic, and even we have more detentions as well. And the detention ratio is growing much faster than the inspection ratio. That means more ships getting detained after port state control inspection. And this is why it is quite important to have a look also on this topic, because we see that the fire safety is the majority of top detainable deficiencies. It's with 6 different deficiencies. It's the biggest group in our top 18. Here's a link where you can have more info about the top 18 campaign from DNV. And then this is the majority of deficiencies, even of non-detainable deficiencies. Consequently, all of them are reflected in the questionnaire, except fire depots. But keep in mind, this is not limited. The inspection campaign is not limited to the questions shown. This is the checklist, 10 questions, operational and technical ones. And as we can see, every single deficiency may be bound for detention. You can find it on our port state web homepage, this list, and it's used during regular inspections from September until November. And it's always takes reference to the IMO resolution A 1155/32, which is about the procedures for port state control. So just to start, we will get a short snapshot about some question. I will hand over to Ole Vidar again.
Yes, thank you very much. Starting off with a short poll here, just a pulse check on where we are in terms of preparing for the CIC campaign. If we can get launched the poll, please, then we kindly ask you to cast your vote on the following question and the following responses here. Are your ships prepared for the CIC with a focus on fire safety? That's the question, and you have 4 options. Yes, new checklists have already been deployed on all ships. Yes, but we need to make improvements before the CIC is launched. Next, no, we still have to check some ships shortly. And the last option you have is this is not relevant to me, or I don't know. So please put your vote to this, and then we can give a few seconds before we see the replies from all of you. Okay, a few seconds more, and then we have a short reflection from either of our experts on this. Should we stop the poll there, and we can show the responses to all of you? Yes, here we go. On the first one, almost half of you seem to be well prepared for the upcoming CIC. and a quarter of you still need to make some actions before the CIC is launched. That's in 2 weeks' time. And almost none of you seem to have done nothing, and this is also not relevant for some of you. So, any reflections from your side, Jens, or any of the other experts surrounded around the table today?
That's a very good result. Thanks to the audience. Most of you are already prepared and they know the checklist. It's good to have you here, but because we can go into some details. Recently, less of you have selected no. That means everybody seems to be aware that this is a hot topic and that we need to do something on it. But now I will hand over to Alessandro for the breakdown of the technical questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. So let's go a bit more in depth on each item of the questionnaire now. The first one is about emergency escapes. So for your vessel, we recommend to check that the escape routes are accessible and clear of obstacles, that IMO signs and marking are present and correctly placed along the routes and in accordance with the approved plans, that main and emergency lights are operational, and if applicable, that securing devices of emergency exit hatches to open deck are also operational and also of a type that to be opened from both sides. For passenger ship, the means of escape should be marked by lightning or photoluminescent strip indicator as appropriate. Next slide. The second item is about fire doors. So here you should check the fire control plan or fire insulation structural fire protection plan as applicable to identify which of the doors on board are fire doors and also their characteristics. Example, fire resistance, also in relation to the bulkhead they're fitted, so class A or B, and if they are provided with self-closing arrangement. You should check the actual condition of the door for damage, for instance. You should test sample of fire doors for local operation, so make sure they latch properly. Sometimes the latch may not engage properly due to the crew tuning the piston to prevent slamming of the door. Test also sample of remotely controlled fire doors for proper release, if applicable. For passenger ship, verify that all fire doors control panel indicators provided from the continuously manned central control station are functional. Check that self-closing fire doors are not improperly latched in open position by means of wedges, ropes, holdback hooks, especially fire doors in the stairwells or engine room on the escape trunks and passenger ship galley and main vertical zone bulkhead. Check that doors fitted in bulkheads of machinery space of category A are reasonably gas tight and self-closing. And check that if any modification or repair of the fire doors, this has been accepted by the flag. The next item is about fire detection and alarm system. Here you should check the following components of the system, including those covering cargo and machinery spaces that have been periodically tested in accordance with the requirement from the flag. So first thing, verified test records. Remember that for detector, monthly testing so that all detectors possibly be tested within 5 years. It's not always possible, of course, this for all vessels, but where it's not possible, then it should an agreement be made with the flag. Check the physical condition of the detectors and manual call points for damage, obstruction, or sometimes they're being painted over. Check the control panel indicator, especially for faults or alarm, or and this should be both on the main panel and the repeaters. Check the emergency power supply switchover, and also check the spares are available on board. Normally at least one for each sensor type and one manual call point. The next item is about ventilation closing appliances like hatches, flaps, and so on. This not to be confused, although sometimes the terms are mixed with the so-called fire dampers. In this case, we recommend to test a sample of closing appliances to ensure that they are actually capable of being properly closed. Those closing appliances shall be accessible and closed from outside the space they serve. They have to be properly marked. They have to be permanently marked and indicate whether the shutoff is open or closed. Check their proper operation and there's no presence of holes or severe deterioration. Check that operation of the ventilation closing appliances is not obstructed by, for instance, some equipment, stores, or cargo. And battery room ventilators shall be fitted with functional means of closing and appropriate warning notice at the closing device. The next item is related to the means of stopping the ventilation in machinery spaces. In this specific case, the reference is to ventilating fans, but they are normally grouped together with other emergency stop like fuel and lube oil pumps. But we will talk more about this in one of the next slides. In this case, test the ventilation fans emergency stop to make sure that they work and they are in accordance with the approved plans. Check that the power ventilation of machinery spaces is operable from at least 2 group positions, but there could be more, one of which should be outside such spaces. And all of them should be periodically tested, at least annually. Check that these means provided for stopping the power ventilation of machinery spaces are entirely separated from ventilation of other spaces. These last 2 checkpoints are actually some design requirement, but it's worth checking the system is arranged in this way and it's not being modified over the time. And now I think we are ready for second poll. So please reply as you did for the first one.
Yes, we are.
Hand over now to Ole.
This time we have inserted a slightly more technical poll than the first one, but here we go. How often is a vessel supposed to test a sample of detectors and manual call points? And you have 3 options every month, so that all devices can be tested within a 5 years period, every year, or never. We have not included an option with I don't know, so if you don't know, then you don't need to reply here. But please cast your poll and please cast your vote, and then we show the results in a few seconds. Very good, and I'm sure that you are happy about the replies here, Alessandro.
Yeah, absolutely. I think almost all attendees got it right. So there's no further comments for this, except that it's worth to check the vessel and company PMS system, but let's say that the minimum requirements as it's written here and as it what is stated in the MSC circular 1432. So after this, I hand over to Aleksandr for the second part of the questionnaire.
Thank you, Alessandro. We continue with question number 6, which is intended to verify that each of the fire pumps provided on board is capable of delivering 2 jets of water. If you have noted, the question does not address the exact pressure which needs to be achieved in that test. And that is done by the reason because it's a separate SOLAS requirement, requiring minimum to ensure the minimum pressure. However, that pressure is tested when two pumps are simultaneously in operation. So all pumps needs to be operated. That includes main and emergency pump. And by that, we confirm and verify that they can provide, each of the pump can provide and supply 2 jets of water. So the requirement is to have the adequate pressure or sufficient throw length. During the test, the general working condition of the pump shall be assessed as well and checked for the absence of any leakages and excessive vibrations. When testing emergency fire pump, special attention shall be paid to the self-priming arrangement. It is rather important to keep self-priming arrangement in a good working condition in order to ensure that this arrangement working and capable of priming the emergency fire pump even when the vessel is in the lightest seagoing condition. For the vessel with unmanned machinery spaces, there is a requirement to start fire pumps from the bridge or from the fire control station remotely. Further, we would encourage you to pay attention to the condition of the other associated components in the fire main line. Such include, but not limited to, the fire hydrants, hoses, nozzles, and the spanners. Mentioned components are to be available in the dedicated places and also to be kept in a good working condition. Next slide, please. Question 7 is related to the means for the stopping of the ventilation fans and the oil transfer pumps. SOLAS requires that such means for the stopping are provided on board and in addition located outside the machinery spaces. So in the event of the fire, they are not cut off and still it's possible to operate them. We would highlight that such means should be easily accessible, properly marked, and kept ready for immediate use. Moreover, the crew should be familiar with the actual location of those stopping means on board the vessel and should be able to demonstrate them in operation if requested by the port state control officers or surveyors. During function test, ventilation fans and oil transfer pumps should either be stopped or the associated circuit breakers tripped. We go to the question number 8. The question is rather self-explanatory and calls for the verification of the room dedicated for the storage of the fire extinguishing media to be used only for that purpose. So in other words, this room shall not be used for any other purpose, neither the storage in such room should be allowed. This is rather easy and straightforward check. However, in addition, we would highlight some of the items which needs to be checked in connection with the room where the fire extinguishing media is stored. And those to include checking of the fire insulation in that room, that it is intact and in good condition, proper operation of the emergency light inside the room, prompt access to the room shall be provided and the key shall be available in the position, and ventilation means, if fitted, are kept in a good working order. In addition, please pay attention that operating instruction for the fixed fire extinguishing system is posted and the relevant system controls are properly indicated and marked. Question number 9 is intended to address the proper operation of the valves fitted in the fire line system of the vessel. We have to admit that the question does not specify which valves are to be checked. However, we strongly believe that the port stain control inspection campaign is targeted for the both valves. That would mean main isolating valves and the hydrant valves. On a cargo vessel, the main isolating valve have to be fitted outside the engine room containing the main fire pumps. The proper operation of the isolated valve can be verified by the following function test, where the main valve shall be completely closed, and with emergency pump running, the crew shall be able to check that there is no water supply at the hydrants located in the engine room. I have to mention that on the tankers, there will be additional isolating valves provided in a fire main system, and those usually are to be located on a tank top deck at the maximum distance of 40 meters between them. Correct operation of those valves are verified by slightly different tests, where the isolating valves are being closed one by one, while the main fire pump is continuously running. There should be no water supply or no water leaks at the hydrant located beyond isolating valves, which is being closed. Good working condition of the hydrant valves can be verified by the following tests, where the fire line is pressurized by the main fire pumps, and there should be no water supply or leakage observed from the hydrant once the valve is completely shut. And the last question of the checklist is related to the drills, and it is intended to verify the frequency and results of the fire drills which are carried on board the vessel. For instance, SOLAS requires that the fire drills are to be conducted monthly and prescribes that the results of such drills are to be recorded. Thus, we expect that the port state control officers will pay special attention to such records. Performance of the crew members assigned to the firefighting duties shall be periodically evaluated by conducting the onboard training and drills in order to ensure that their competency in the firefighting skills is maintained and to ensure that the crew familiarization with the onboard firefighting system and appliances is ensured. Fire drills shall be planned in a most realistic manner, where the due consideration is to be given to the various emergency scenarios that can occur, taking into the consideration the type of the vessels and the cargo being carried. Further on the slide, you will see the certain roles and responsibilities for the crew participating in drills, and those are defined by the master list, which is provided on board every vessel.
So then, thanks, Aleksandr. Thanks, Alessandro, for the good presentation. Now we come to the last item, to the next item, which means how to be prepared. Well, the main key is the running ISM system. Please adjust your ISM safety management system that to the fire safety items. All the questions and all the deficiencies can be related to the safety management system, which is typically we have maintenance, which is insufficient implementation of maintenance procedures. Then we have emergency preparedness, not only for the drill, but also for the fire pump and for the operation of ventilation and fire doors. And last but not least, you have resources and personnel. Portside is always takes a focus on how is crew and how is master behaving and is it all running smoothly, especially during the drill. Again, you can find out how the communication works, how the crew is trained, and about general behavior and knowledge of responsibilities. So this is your job is that you all constantly review the safety management system on board the ship, also in view of the CIC. Then we have what we can do is we have at least some resources which can help you and assist you. There is a DNV website, especially for PSC, just where you can find where you will find the recording of this webinar, the checklist, and some and the last recordings of the last years as well for training purposes. Then we have our main use now is the PSC planner, which is in Veracity, which is for use for every DNV customer. Then we mentioned already the technical and regulatory newsletters, which are about this campaign, about the PSC top 18 focus items, and some other technical measures. And we would like to point out that we have offer a training where you can tailor-made in-house seminars, where you have one-day interactive workshops, where you can get some webinars made to your needs. This is all done by DNV Academy, which can help you. Some words on the PSC planner will be done by my colleague Gerald, and I take over to Gerald.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. We see here on this slide a checklist generated by the PSC planner, because in general, we consider a pre-active approach as a useful step in order to be prepared for the next PSC inspection. And with this checklist generated by our tool, you will have a detailed overview about ship-specific findings, about port-specific findings for the corresponding ship type in that port, and continue it also by our top 18 detainable deficiencies worldwide. And on start of the concentrated inspection campaign in September, also the 10 related questions we reviewed here will be included in this checklist, so that the crew can be well prepared, knowing what's coming up from September. And with the next slide, we're coming already to a summary. What is important is that the crew of your ship will be informed in order to get to know what's coming up on September with this special fire and safety campaign, and be aware that findings can be an ISM related issue. For example, if a maintenance finding will be considered as a failure on the ISM system. Therefore, we encourage you to use the checklist generated by our tool, and finally share also the presentation, which will be available on our website shortly after our webinar. Yeah, and with this, I would like to hand over back to Ole Vidar. Then we come to the last topic on our agenda. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, we are already at the Q&A part of this this webinar. And yes, this is an overview of the experts supporting us today. Maybe I can kindly ask you to turn on your cameras, Jens, Gerald, Alessandro, and Aleksandr. And then we can see who we are talking to when we do the questions here. We have got quite a lot of questions, so there is no so we have sufficient topics to talk about for the next 25 minutes or so. I hope also this part of the webinar will be a useful part of this this morning. But okay, let's start from, I was about to say from the top of the list here. I'm also trying to combine a couple of questions which goes in the same direction. So please bear with me if I kind of group them a little bit together here. Okay, let's get going. The first one is about US Coast Guard. Is this CIC checklist also part of the US Coast Guard inspections?
Well, I can give an answer on this. Usually, Coast Guard is not taking part in the CIC. They have their own campaigns. They are out, but at least we have to take in mind that also the US Coast Guard port state control officers know this checklist, and this checklist, as we had saw before, is main part of the detainable and also non-detainable items found during in the past. So they will not use this checklist, but of course they will check on parts of it.
Very good. We keep going. There are quite a lot of questions on fire dampers, and we'll come back to some even more technical questions on that in a short while. It was also covered during the presentation. But one question here, fire dampers are not part of the checklist. Can a ship be detained for a defective fire damper? Is that for you, Alessandro?
Yeah, I can reply that. The answer in short is yes. This can be, since as a fire damper, as I said properly, so a device that is installed in the ventilation duct, and that normally is placed in a way of fire division, A or B class. So they are considered as detainable deficiency, and if they are not working properly, detention can be the consequence. In this case, maybe I can also extend a bit what difference between a fire damper and ventilation closing appliances. So a fire damper is the easiest way to distinguish that the fire damper has to it comes normally with the certificate, type approval certificate, stating compliance with the FTP code. So it has to go through a testing, type testing normally, and in the certificate there are all the requirements to say that the fire damper and the characteristic of the fire dampers itself. Sometimes is confused with the ventilation dampers, which are not really well, or ventilation closing appliances, which the technical part is not really well defined or specified in SOLAS or other international instruments. And we are talking here about flaps and so on. So the two things are slightly different. Nevertheless, we if you have fire dampers on board, even if they are not strictly speaking included in the checklist, we recommend to check them periodically. This comes also to the possible gaps that are in the fire dampers, which are normally to a minimum. In the ventilation dampers, again, is not well defined how much a gap between the flaps should be, but the post-state control sometimes requires that they are gas tight, which is not normally the case. So if you get in a post-state control when they require that the flap is completely gas tight, if this is not certified as a fire damper, we can question this finding.
Very good. Thank you for the elaboration there, Alessandro. Excellent. We just need to keep going. Where can we find the requirements for periodical maintenance of fire protection system? Is that also for you, Alessandro? Or?
Yeah, I can reply that as well. There are several places. I would say that first of all, you have to check if there are flag-specific requirements. Some flags have their own instruction for those. your PMS system will be also part that you develop, but most of them, the minimum requirement of most of the fire protection system in this circular MSC 1, circular 1432, which most of the flag administration have adopted. So that is where you will find a lot of requirement, and that is for weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, and so on, 5 yearly. So that's the place I would say. And not to forget, sorry, we have also a DMV class guideline that lists all the required maintenance for firefighting, but also LSA equipment. That is a good document that you can use for consult. We can attach it, I think, to the handover documents after the webinar.
We can do that. Excellent. Thank you. Then there is a more general question about port state here. It's probably either for you, Jens, or Gerald. Recently, conditions of class were copy and paste to the deficiency list during port state control inspection on a number of the ships managed by our company. Could you please clarify if this is becoming a normal trend?
Well, I would not say it's a normal trend, but of course the port data can copy and paste the deficiencies, the findings which are covered by CIC. For you as for the master, or for you as the owner, it should be not too bad, because usually port state shall accept our conditions. That means the action code will not be detainable, but should be like 47 as in the agreed class condition. It's up to the master to discuss if this really has to be in the PSC report, but some port sitters, they do, and of course they can. And they even can give own time frames for a rectification. This should be discussed.
Very good. Anything to add from your side, Gerald, or we keep going?
Yeah, well, a short notice probably, because in some cases we have also, when the PSC open a finding for which, for example, spare parts for repair are needed, then of course it might be difficult to settle this finding prior detention. But when the class will open a condition and documenting the follow-up within the suitable time frame, the vessel will be released based on the follow-up by class with the condition is ensured. And therefore, it is also a suitable way when knowing that there is here or there a problem with the vessel, then it is better to inform the PSC in advance, or to show that we have already a class condition showing this as a follow-up by class.
Very good. We keep going here. Some of the questions are very detailed and specific, some are a little bit more broad and general. Here's a specific one. Is there any height requirement of putting the escape IMO symbol from deck level? Any of you?
I can take this one. I don't think that there are requirements for the photoluminescent marking fitting, but there is a requirement for the low location lightning system which are fitted on board the passenger vessels. So then there are strict requirements on how high from the floor the marking should be provided.
Okay, very well. I try the next question here. Fire door with self-closure have hydraulic closure. After changing the ramp, there is still some hole left on the door. How to close that? Sorry if I misinterpreted the question a little bit, but I hope it was okay.
Yeah, well, Not sure. Okay, fully understand. This I think is a more case by case. It depends. There are typically some minor damages in the fire doors, which have to be assessed. It could be that if they are only superficial, we can check with the door manufacturer, and that if they are not impairing the door fire division or class door fire division properties, then is acceptable. Different the cases if the structure is compromised. In that case, it depends also how extensive is the door, but it may in some cases invalidate the type approval or the MED certification of the door. So we have to check a bit case by case. Difficult to give a general answer on that.
Very good. And since you are unmuted, Alessandro, back again to you from one of your slides here. Ventilation closing appliances. What's the difference between those and fire dampers?
Yeah, I replied. I think I replied earlier.
I think you
so
touched upon that exactly. Or you want to elaborate on anything beyond that?
Yeah, well, the main thing is to check if the device is required to have a certificate, the type approval or product certificate, which the fire damper is required according to the FTP code, while the ventilation closing appliances normally don't.
Very good. Thank you. We go on. In some cases where it's a very small print here, so sorry for my hesitation sometimes. In some cases, when both engine fan rooms are used due to pressure difference on both sides of the fire door between SGR and engine room, the door might not be closed by self-closing devices, but it works when fans are stopped as they should be if the fire in engine room. Is this condition acceptable? Is that for you, Aleksandr, as well, Alessandro? And please elaborate a little bit on the question, which I didn't see entirely.
Yeah, well, if I understood it correctly, you normally have to test the self-closing fire door in the every condition. It's typical that when you the ventilation is on or off, they may not always close, but you have to test and make sure that in the worst kind of condition they are able to close, as this is an emergency thing that has to work in every condition. So adjust the door closing devices in a way that it can close when the ventilation is also on in this case. And it's recommended that the first part of the closing is slow, and then the last part, it can be a bit faster, just to be able to close and latch the door itself.
Very good. Then there is a short and sweet question here. Shall there be 1 or 2 spanners in each hose box?
One is enough normally, as long as you have a device able to connect the fire hose with the hydrant. So one is sufficient.
Very good. And that's a second. There we go. Any specific distance required to be observed on the delivery of the 2 required jets of water by the fire pumps?
Not a specific distance in terms, let's say there's not the prescriptive distance in SOLAS, but there are 2 things to consider here. That when you do this test, you should ideally be able to reach every part of the vessel with the jets of from the fire hoses. If you have doubt, then what you can check what is actually required by SOLAS. That means that 2 pumps running at the same time, so simultaneously. You have to check that the pressure at the hydrant is at least, here depends on the vessel type and on the gross tonnage, but between 2.5, 2.7 for cargo ship, and a bit higher for passenger ship, typically 3-4 bars. So if the pressure is lower, then there's something you have to probably investigate.
Excellent, thank you. We keep going. With regards to the testing of fire pumps, during testing, while we are switching to test between pumps, for example, from main to end emergency, is there any recommendations in terms of timing to wait in order to confirm that the water pressure has been taken over by the newly started pump? Can any of you try to elaborate on that one?
Yeah, I can reply on that one. There are no specific requirements to the timing. However, there should be ensured sufficient time in order to switch over to assess the pressure provided by the main fire pump and emergency fire pump. So yeah, normally some time is expected to be taken into the consideration when switching between those two.
Very good. Very good, and thank you. Maybe another one for you, Aleksandr here. What access to the room would be okay? Does the key have to be outside the store, or can it be kept in 2 different locations, such as fire station, bridge, etc.?
Well, this question is not really addressed by the SOLAS, so fitting the door to the CO2 room with the lock and the key is more safety issue. However, if the lock is fitted, so then there should be a system around it providing safe access and when access is needed, meaning that in case of the emergency, it would be normally the key would be arranged with the break glass box, while for the maintenance of the room and periodical testing, the crew should have their own key in order to access the room and carry out maintenance and testing. So it's more up to the company to define the procedures and implement them on board.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions on the key here, so I hope that answered most of the questions on this.
I hope I have covered all of them. Yeah.
If not, we come back to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, short and sweet one. CO2 ventilation, should it be supply types or exhaust types?
Well, mechanical ventilation for the CO2 room is required if the CO2 room is located below the open deck. And that ventilation should be exhaust type, where the exhaust should be taken from the bottom of the room. So it's exhaust type.
Very good. We try the next one. What is the FSS code requirement, not by maker, for replacing the spare foam charges? Sorry.
I'm not sure how relevant is this for this one, but I think we can take and reply this later in the.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. Yes, some of the questions are we need to come back to, or you need to come back to us. But also, some of the questions are extremely specific. So then we try to cover the ones that are of general interest to all of you. So hope you bear with us with that. Then it's a question about testing of fire pump. What is it? I need to read it here. Testing of fire pump discharge pressure can be different and may not be a good indication of the fire hose jet. How should we confirm the jet is acceptable?
Yeah, I think I covered it earlier a bit with when I discussed about the fact that the jet should reach or you should be able to reach each part of the vessel with one of the hoses that went the relevant jets. And yeah, the requirement anyway is on the pressure at the hydrants.
Yeah. Very good. For checking of CO2 in cylinders means available. Trying again. For checking levels of CO2 in cylinders means available are general weighting, thermotape, level gauging instrument, can we just use level gauging instrument only even if this method is not specified or stated in maker instruction manual? Question mark.
Yeah, the level check, it can be a way to check which of the cylinder is at the level of the liquid in the cylinder, and you have to see if it's possible to actually check with a certain accuracy depending on the temperature you have in the room normally, or the ambient temperature. But this does not exempt to the proper weighting as required by the MSC circular, which is being also revised recently, the 1318, which gives both the way of testing the CO2 cylinder annually and every 10 years. So hydrostatic test and weighing of the cylinder. So yes, you can check by the level, but only as a kind of preliminary check or test for the weighing.
Very good. It's unavoidable, but we are coming back to quite a few questions on fan dampers. It has been stated that fire dampers should be closed tightly, but equipping some dampers with materials such as gaskets as a construction make it difficult to close. What is your recommendation on this?
Yeah. Again, here we are talking of fire dampers, fan dampers, ventilation dampers. So we have to remember that SOLAS defines very clearly what is a fire damper, and that can be manual, automatic, or remotely controlled. And so check the certificates also for the construction details of the fire dampers. Anything else, like ventilation closing appliances, should serve the purpose of what they are installed for. So for instance, checking that they have gaskets also may not be the case, as long as they prevent basically amount of air to come in or gas to go out, let's say, of the space. So normally no gaskets are required for ventilation closing appliances. And we know that sometimes also some porosity control, check that no light is going through. What I would recommend in these cases, if kind of ask the post-gate control officer to give the rule reference for this requirement, and we will be happy to assist further and to be also in close let's say discussion with the post-gate control officer to try to sort this out.
Very good. And we are back again to the topic of fire doors. Quite a few questions on that. Is there any specific method in which the inspectors will check the closing of the doors? Sometimes the inspector will only open a door a little bit and check to see if the door closes fully, whereas the ship staff will normally open the door fully to see if it closes positively. Do you have any reflections on that, any of you? This is maybe your part, Aleksandr.
Well, if I can answer this, if the door, we are talking of self-closing door here, is adjusted properly, even if you open it slightly, that should be able to close. Otherwise, adjust it accordingly.
Very good. There are gaps in the emergency room flaps due to design in some cases. How to manage port state control as some are not accepting this?
Yeah,
of course. Alessandro, you want?
No, please, yes, go ahead.
Well, if port control doesn't accept any of the deficiencies or any of the installations, of course, it is best to call in a surveyor, or at least to have a telephone call to the nearest station. What you can do is that you can issue always a date case with 4 hours urgency, and you will get a technical defined answer. And then you can discuss with port state control. But at least if he does not agree, you always have to choose a surveyor. If it comes to a detention, or if a detention might become, it is the best way and the cheapest.